This is the Dzogchen Lama Jigme Gyatso of the Buddha Joy Meditation School. Come, let us explore how everything you know about manifesting is wrong, followed by meditating like a Jedi, as a group. Let's begin. So this morning's lesson is rooted in an ancient text. Going to Tamp button 7. This text is known as Spaciousness of Vajrasattva. It's composed many centuries ago by the great Buddhist reformer Prahevajra. This early morning, let's take a look at the 6th passage. Here's my intention. I'm going to treat this like an Oreo cookie. An Oreo cookie has 3 parts: a cookie, icing, and cookie. So what I'm going to do is read it, explain it, and then read it. Sound good? Excellent. And yet, the miraculous is not beyond our recognition, due to intuitive insight into the natural state. Our innate capacities and spiritual powers come to the fore naturally from within our own inner depths. To explain this, I'm going to go back to the outline. So I'm going to tap button 2. That should do it. Late-stage capitalism delights in eroding the safety net of the masses. Or to paraphrase Martin Luther King, we have socialism for the billionaires and rugged individualism for everybody else. Not too long ago, an Australian billionaire on camera said that the workers are getting too uppity and that we need to make them really, really hurt so that they only have enough bandwidth to think about work. As opposed to protest. And, apparently that's what's happening now. So it's understandable that we want some sort of a safety net. And if we can't have a corporeal one, our inner child reaches for a incorporeal safety net, a protection from bad things, a way of magnetizing to us good things. We want to influence our good and bad fortunes. Throughout the history of Buddhism, ever since the dimming of proto-Buddhism and the rise of institutional Buddhism, people have looked around at the religions of their neighbors or the religions of their childhood and begged and borrowed certain facets, brought it into the practice of institutional Buddhism. And so we saw in institutional Buddhism ritual magic, with the setting of intentions and rituals and invocations, and eventually even internal alchemy and the like. We need to do more than just say that that's not what the Buddha taught, because quite honestly, the Buddha might not have existed. The Buddha might just be an archetype. So let's look at it this way. Duality. What is the fundamental duality of Buddhism? Dread and desire, pushing and pulling, fearing and hoping. You get the idea. And so how do we protect ourselves from bad things and draw to ourselves good things without reinforcing duality, or to put a sharper point on it, without causing our choices, utterances, and deeds to be the marionettes dancing upon the string, held by our dreads and desires? For is that not the freedom the Buddha offers us? Not freedom from the perception of dread and desire, but freedom from their tyranny. So how do we do that? How do we walk this metaphoric tightrope between making sure the legitimate corporeal needs of ourselves and our loved ones and our neighbors and even our enemies are met without without indulging our own superstitions, no less controlling tendencies? It comes down to our survival instincts. All complex life forms on this planet have evolved rudimentary survival instincts. Consider, if you, I'm going to work loop, brace yourselves. Consider, if you will, the 6 F's. Viscerally, precognitively, whenever we encounter any thing or being or phenomena, there's a checklist we go through. Deep down in our spilkas, in our guts, it is as if we ask, hey, that thing over there, should I fuck it? Should I feed on it? Should I fight it? Should I flee from it? Should I faint before it? Should I fawn over it? These are hardwired into us. They do not exist because we believe in a real or imagined self. They do not exist because we have failed to understand emptiness. They exist as an evolutionary asset to keep us alive. The Buddha put it simply in an ancient text. He explained that there are 4 bases of mindfulness: the circumstantial, the physical, the interpersonal, and the mental, and that there is a duality for each of them. Circumstantially, we are already wired to hate peril and love safety, or to put it another way, to hate scarcity and love plenty. Physically, we are hardwired to hate pain and love pleasure. Interpersonally, we are hardwired to hate scorn and love praise. Mentally, we are hardwired to hate shame and love fame. Now you could say, but I am above such petty things. No, we are not. Deep down, below our preferences, below our beliefs, below our self-esteem, these things have evolved into us. Let us consider the last 2. Consider our distant ancestors back 300,000 years ago. In any tribe, in any clan, the people who are the most loved and perceived as the most important got the best mating opportunities, the best eating opportunities, and were much safer. The most cushy combat roles, typically, whereas those who were the least loved, considered the least important, were given the worst mating opportunities, if any, the worst feeding opportunities, if any, and the most perilous combat roles. So we have evolved this tendency to, crave safety, pleasure, fame, and praise. it is unproductive to pretend they don't exist. It is unprotective to beat ourselves up and say, if I only believed in no self, if I only understood emptiness, they would not be there. Yes, they would. Neither no self nor emptiness are not panaceas, despite the fanciful mythologies spun by patriarchy and their ulterior motives. Only thing that the benefit is no self and emptiness are just metaphors that at best describe the fleeting experience latent within each exhalation. Those who tell you that every bit of misfortune is an indictment because we have bad karma, they're the same people who tell you that every bit of suffering we experience is an indictment on our wisdom. These people are either sincerely stupid or cynically deceitful. These people are the victim blamers. These people will prey upon us when we are most vulnerable. These people are human predators and should not be, and whose advice should not be relied upon. Then what do we do? How do we do this deal? How do we make sure our needs are met in a way that does not indulge the fundamental duality of pushing and pulling and being a slave to pushing and pulling? I remember being so disappointed at one point in my classical Buddhist training when I was just like, dude, this feels like witchcraft. This feels like slavery to ritual. And I remember conversing with someone after the release of the movie The Craft. Excuse me, I spit on the screen. After the release of the movie The Craft, and I was speaking to this very lovely individual who worked in a magic shop, magic with a K, and she said that there's 3 levels of magicians. Some work with rituals, some work with incantation, and some work just with mind. And that sounded pretty cool. Fast forward. I've had the good fortune of studying every sect of Buddhism, and I'm so grateful to have stumbled upon the text from which I teach, the spaciousness of Vajrasattva. This really answered a lot of questions. A lot of people, many of them sincere, teach that we have to concentrate on something. The problem is that doing so messes up our central nervous system. It triggers our amygdala, the seat of anxiety and aggression, no less causes us to present with symptoms of depression. Big bummer. But the contemporary manifesting is ripe with demands to focus. There are vision boards, and there are affirmations, and there are visualizations, and there are people who tell us we must force ourselves to feel certain emotions, for it is those emotions that they claim that will magnetize those amazing things to us. But all those things are indulging our controlling tendencies, which are antithetical to our tendencies to be laid back. They are indulging our rigid tendencies, which are antithetical to our tendencies to be flexible. So how can we, let me quickly indulge some visual aids. So how can we do this deal without becoming as grumpy as Mace Windu or as horrible as the Big Lebowski? How can we do this while being as groovy as Qui-Gon Jinn and as far out as the dude? Simple. We already know that overworking both our dorsolateral and medial prefrontal cortex is going to muck things up. But when we passively cooperate with both facets of our autonomic nervous system, the anxiety and aggression of our amygdala is calmed, and the empathy of our anterior cingulate gyrus is gently stimulated, which is much nicer. So, what is the autonomic nervous system response to our needs of both safety and plenty? We'll begin with mindfulness. Every time we inhale, whether we know it or not, we are already wired to automatically access the middle bit of our spinal cord, which could be described pretentiously as the nexus of our sympathetic nervous system. It has evolved to help us to vulnerably, passively, viscerally, randomly, and fleetingly notice all mind's antics of perception, emotion, intention, cognition, recollection, and imagination, including our dreads and desires, our fears and our hopes, that which we avert and that which towards we experience avarice, including the external, everything from the external to the internal, from the physical to the mental, from the pleasurable to the painful, from the interesting to the boring, from the glorious to the grotesque. So passive mindfulness is noticing not only vulnerably, but randomly. We can't help but notice our dreads. We cannot help but notice our desires. Therefore, there is no need to concentrate. There is no need to create a vision board. There is no need to create an invocation or an affirmation. But what do we do with the stuff that populate our awareness? That brings us, oh, I skipped a step, sorry guys. What is the most efficient way for us to watch the antics of mind? All we got to do is silently and mentally recite the verb watch every time we feel our chest subtly, gently swell as we inhale. What do we do with all the dreads and desires that have populated our awareness? We meditate. You see, every time we exhale, whether we know it or not, we are already wired to automatically access both the attic and the basement regions of that exact same spinal cord. These two regions working in cooperation can be described as the nexus of our parasympathetic nervous system, which has evolved to help us to relax to such a degree that which we noticed during our previous inhalation could fleetingly feel somewhat less stressful, less permanent, less defining, and even as non-graspable as a vast empty void. Like the illusion of the infinite azure sky on a bright and beautiful cloudless morn, which, although could look tantalizing to the eye, could feel non-graspable to the hand. It has been said, well, let's just put it this way. 50% of the Buddha's Eightfold Path is comprised of loving kindness. Exercising kind intention, kind communication, kind conduct, and even kind commerce. The more we forsake the folly of active focus and active analysis, instead practice passive mindfulness and meditation and reliance upon both facets of our spinal cord. The more our aggressive and anxious amygdala is calmed, as I mentioned previously, and the more our empathy of our anterior cingulate gyrus is gently stimulated. In terms of metaphysics, there are some who would say there's no greater karmic booster than just love. And that the highest love is the spontaneous and uncontrived byproduct of simply watching and resting. Of course, I forgot to mention that the most efficient way for us to rest, to practice the meditation that is simply resting in the facet of mind that feels non-graspable, is for us to silently and mentally recite the verb rest every time we feel our chest subtly sink, as gently we exhale. So simply by watching and resting, we create all the good karma we need by spontaneously giving a flying fuck. You might say, what about bad karma? Well, there's no thing as purifying as simply training in emptiness. And the most efficient way to train in emptiness is just to viscerally rest in harmony with each exhalation. So the great irony is that simply by watching and resting in harmony with our inhalation and our exhalation, we will effortlessly move away from that which is dreadful and move closer to that which is desirous. Now, you might say, not everything is airy-fairy, Lama Jigme. Exactly. Consider, if you will, effortless effort. The more we train in mindfulness and meditation, the more our choices and utterances and deeds flow, not from calculations, contrivance, not from wild scatteredness, but from love's deeply centered spontaneity. So this mindfulness and meditation not only fuel our good karma and pacify our bad karma, but they guide our intuition. They guide our choices, utterances, and deeds in the most fortunate direction, which is lovely. So now I've got to throw a big old brick through the plate glass window of wishful thinking. Shit's gonna happen. The rain falls on the just and the unjust. Everybody is born, everybody dies. Or to reference a famous stand-up comedian, everybody shits, everybody cries. There's things out of our control. As difficult as that is to hear, a healthy habit of noticing and relaxing in harmony with our inhalations and exhalations will help us to deal with the slings and arrows of outrageous misfortune. I almost forgot to mention, and a wonderful side effect of the effortless effort of going with the flow is that it ensures that we will use the entirety of our central nervous system, including our prefrontal cortex, in the most sustainable way, using it not from a place of indulging our rigidity and controlling tendencies, but from a place of flexibility and being laid back. So when we read the biographies and autobiographies of Nobel laureates, so many of them tell the same thing. They became masters of their field, of every facet of STEM, science, technology, engineering, mathematics, that was related to their field of expertise. And they did their due diligence with researching and observing and correlating and analyzing. And yet when they came to a brick wall, at a certain point, they had to walk away. They had to rest their body and mind and leave space for the unconscious creativity that Einstein described as intelligence at play. So what I'm proposing to you is not anti-intellectualism, but optimizing the efficacy, the efficiency of our central nervous system. Does this mean that if we just meditate, practice mindfulness and meditation for 5 minutes every 12 hours, the world is our oyster and we will always get what we want when we want for as long as we want? Well, ask the Rolling Stones. What do they say? They said you can't always get what you want. And sadly, they are correct. Of course, that reminds me of an episode of Star Trek The Next Generation where a very powerful psychic accidentally got what he wanted in a moment of anger and everyone on his planet died, including his wife. So it's sometimes a very good thing that we don't always get what we want when we want it the instant we want it. So let's get back to manifesting. Going to tap button 2. In a world of perils and pleasures, dreads and desires, the most strategic thing to do, the most wisest thing to do, is to practice as vulnerability as we inhale to whatever objects of aversion or avarice cartwheel across the stage of our mind, and to relax as best we can during our each exhalation. And that not only helps us to process our dreads and desires, it helps us to get out of our own way, to make room for freedom from the dreads, to make room for the presence of the desires, and to be able to cope with the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune. One of the greatest ironies is that as dreads and desires control our choices, utterances, and deeds less and less and less, it could feel as if our serendipity and our good fortune increases. But rationally, gently. So, the next time you are infatuated with someone, as you sit in meditation, you don't need to repress that infatuation. You do not need to chase after it. all you need to do is, as you breathe in, when it appears, let it appear. As you breathe in, as you relax, and it fades or you fade, let that happen. That's the most efficient way to be sane and peaceful and fortunate. You have taken your first step into a much larger world. If you feel that I have earned it, you could give this live stream a thumbs up. The Meditate Like a Jedi is made possible due to the generosity of viewers, just like you. And now, for the remainder of this morning's live stream, let us practice mindfulness and meditation together as a team. So things that appear desirous aren't always good for us, and things that seem disastrous aren't always bad for us. Consider a tale you've probably already heard. A farmer's wife gave birth to a son, and his friends said, "Oh, how fortunate." And the farmer said, "Perhaps." Shortly thereafter, the farmer's wife died of complications, and his friends said, "Oh, how unfortunate." And he said, "Perhaps." This farmer's son grew into a strapping young man who one day had the good fortune to find a wild Mustang. And his friend said, "Oh, how fortunate." And the farmer said, "Perhaps." While attempting to tame the Mustang, he fell down and broke his leg. And the farmer's friend said, "Oh, how unfortunate." And the farmer said, "Perhaps." That very week, a local warlord came around, compelling young men into service. And because of his lameness, his son was exempt. And you guessed it. Once again, his friend said, "Oh, how fortunate." And the farmer said, "Perhaps." We don't always, despite the intensity of our dreads and our desires, we don't always know, regardless of our certitude, what is actually best for us and in what timetable it is best for us. Therefore, it can behoove us to surrender our dreads and desires to the machinations of mindfulness and meditation. The free fall that is meditation can feel very jarring to our rigid and controlling tendencies. A useful workaround is to play with a variation of Bengali crease counting. Let us touch the tip of our left thumb to the lowest set of creases upon its little finger, and thus keep track of our first set of 16 inhalations. This left hand we can rest palms up in our lap. Every time we silently and mentally recite the verb watch as our chest swells with breath, we can advance our right thumb up the creases and tips of its fingers. Let us do this together right now as a team, beginning with our right little finger. Behold, I've run out of places upon which to touch the tip of my right thumb. Therefore, I can turn my attention back to my left hand and advance my left thumb. And now you get the basic idea of how we can count 16 sets of 16 inhalations. Counting 16 inhalations in our right hand takes a little bit more than 1 minute. Counting 16 sets of 16 inhalations each on our left hand could take a little bit more than 20 minutes. While gathering our first collection of about 20 minutes, we could rest the great knuckle at the base of our right middle finger upon the tip of our left middle finger, palms up in our lap. While gathering our second collection of about 20 minutes, we could rest the middle knuckle of our right middle finger upon the tip of our left middle finger, palms up in our lap. While gathering our third collection of about 20 minutes, we could rest the third knuckle of our right middle finger upon the tip of our left middle finger, palms up in our lap. Overwhelmed? The antidote is repetition. Meditate with me once every 12 hours or so, and within a week or two, the Buddha's path you can master. Elitists abound, and many of them will insist that you must master the full lotus position, otherwise you are a failure as a meditator. That's Jim Dandy, except for two things. Number one, the Buddha never taught that. His sitting instructions were remarkably vague. And number two, the most ancient Buddhist statuary does not depict the full lotus position, but rather the does not depict the full lotus position wherein our shins are crossed, but the quarter lotus position wherein our shins are stacked like the components of an Oreo cookie. What is the ideal sitting posture? One that is sustainable and comfortable, that lets you sit without injury and lets you lengthen your spine gently during each inhalation. Do not hesitate to adjust your legs once every 15 to 20 minutes or so. It's better to adjust your legs than develop arthritis. There's nothing sustainable about arthritis. The moment you have a specific question about the philosophies or techniques of Taoism, Buddhism, Tantra, Dzogchen, Zen, or Mahamudra, do not hesitate to type your question in great detail in the chat window. for I tend to check for questions about once every 5 minutes or so. you might say, I am a man of action. Meditation does not become me. That's great, but you got to rest sometime. And while you rest, you might as well make it productive. You can meditate standing, sitting, lying down. You can even meditate while making love. And yes, you can meditate while driving. Remember, your eyes can be open and just what silently and mentally blending the recitation of watch and rest in harmony with your breathing will actually make you a more responsive driver, less prone to road rage. I live in Southern California, the freeway hellscape of traffic jam despair. But imagine the irony of turning gridlock into your own personal meditation temple. In about 3 hours, I would very much like to return to lead today's second lesson, followed by meditating like a Jedi. And if you are as geeky as me, may the Force be with you always.